Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Supercoach, mates. Well, round 16 is done and dusted. Not sure if every supporter base is particularly happy with how their side's playing, but I can tell you now that I'm very happy with how my Supercoach side is looking. Not sure if Thomas has the same sentiments, but we'll soon find out about that. So since it's round 16 and we're almost at Supercoach finals, we're just going to do a very quick health check on our sides. So since I've got my side up, I'm actually going to go first. I'm going to quickly talk about my side when it loads. Here we go. Right, there we go. So, my side, I'm happy is pretty much finished. I've kept Sicily and I've kept Clayton Oliver. I know Sicily's out for one more week, and I'm hoping that Oliver's back this week. But otherwise, I'm quite happy with where my side sits. Obviously, I've just got that one more midfielder to jump on, which I'm hoping will be Christian Petrarca. But otherwise, yeah, I'm happy with where the side is. It's been a long time to get here, with a few hiccups along the way with the Goey getting suspended, and then Oliver, having a typical hamstring that's gone on now for nearly 2 months. And there were a few others who not starting Nick Dacos, which never do that again. But yeah, I'm glad with where my side sits. So obviously with my bench cover, so I've got Seamus Mitchell and Wardlaw and Taron Thomas essentially as my bench cover for the year. And I can't see any of those three getting dropped from their respective sides. So I'm quite happy with my bench cover. So I guess for me, it's basically going to be just working out where to get the money from for that final midfielder. But otherwise, yeah, I'm quite happy with where I'm at. The other option I've got is to move on Wardlaw and use Taron Thomas as both the forward and the midfield cover. But if I can just get away with keeping Wardlaw, I will. But that's not set in stone. But yeah, otherwise, I'm really happy with where the side is. I'm happy I've got the 5 trades left. And I'm in this position, so I can really hopefully just cross fingers and hope that no one gets injured. And that there's not a mass amount of injuries. Otherwise, I think everyone's going to be in trouble. So that's where I sit. How about yourself, Thomas?
Yeah, I mean, obviously I've had a pretty rough season and it's been pretty well documented. I managed to crack into the top 10K, over the buys, which was a really positive thing for my side. I think just out of luck more so, that I had good numbers for the last 2 buy rounds, which made it healthy. But yeah, scored subpar. I think just scored a tick under 2,500 last week. I know it's not on screen at the moment, but at the moment I'm in a pretty similar situation to Nathan in the fact that I've got just under 5 trades, so 4 trades left. I've got slightly a weaker side with regards to premiums on field, so I got rid of Sicily. Got Himmelberg in, and likes of Will Day Himmelberg rounding off my defence, still in there. Sheasel's at F6, so it's a bit of a weaker finishing off per se. So it does make it frustrating at times when those guys don't find. We'll have a chat about it later in the episode about talking about those fake premiums with regards to players that are at the premium status but not scoring like some. This week, looking likely, I was having Fyfe and Johnson as cover on the bench, but unfortunately Fyfe's injury, it makes it frustrating with him. Not exactly sure what I'll do with him. But at the end of the day, I'm looking to get rid of Weddle and bring in Mills, which will just get me there with the money I've got in the bank, which will finish off my midfield. So Mills will still essentially be my M8 with the looks of things, but Mills are still at M8. And then Briggs will be an interesting factor to whether I trade him off for someone and essentially have them as either F6 or cover as well. So, yeah, it'd be interesting to see how we go about it. But I think if I get through the season and stay in that top kind of 5K-ish, I'll be pretty happy with how the season's gone, because it's been a pretty rough season, that's for sure. But anyway, let's kick things off with our first point of discussion.
Yeah, so our first point of discussion here is Dan Houston. So obviously broke Essendon hearts with that match-winning goal. I was obviously being a Collingwood supporter. I was hoping it would miss, but it didn't. It cleared the line by about a metre. So he's 5.58 with a break-even of 15. And Will Day, who I think a lot of people jumped on sort of around that round 8 to 10 mark when he really started getting midfield minutes. But obviously he's fallen away a little bit. He's still scoring all right, but I'm not sure if he's scoring as well as as these Uber premiums. He might be one of these fake premiums that we might discuss later on. But if you had the option of these two, Thomas, which one are you picking?
Not necessarily which one I'm picking, more so who essentially, if I'm bringing him in or trading him out. So Houston, obviously very, very impressive, back-to-back 140 pluses, and he's dominating off that half-back line for Port. Obviously helped with that match winner. I don't think he got 150, probably about 120 at best. But yeah, he's been very, very impressive. It looks like this is a week to grab him if you want. Unfortunately, I think he's going to skyrocket into the 600Ks. He's, basically the architect for Port off the half-back line. I think there might be slightly cheaper options that might be better than Houston. Houston is known to produce a bit of a stinker. From time to time, I had a bit of history with him bringing him in last season and essentially ruining my backline through injury. But
I remember this.
Yeah, so he's one who's very capable of producing a very impressive score. But I think if you're looking for a defender and you have that money there, I think he's very worthwhile bringing in. Port are going on a tear at the moment, and he's a big reason why they're doing very well. So yeah, I'd say there wouldn't be any reason why you wouldn't bring him in if you had that money available, considering his break even so low. But Will Day, he's an interesting one because I know a lot of people are in the category like myself who have him in the side, and he's just not producing consistent numbers. Obviously went berserk the week before, but I'm pretty sure I didn't watch this game on the weekend, but I'm pretty sure he played in the mids.
Yeah, he was in there.
Yeah. Not in defence like he did last week. So he was basically playing a goalkeeper, and we mentioned this on our Patreon write-up, that he basically plays a goalkeeper in absence of Sicily, which helped his score immensely. He basically touched everything and went huge. So I don't know exactly why they got rid of him back in the mids, maybe to, help that mid-rotation out, but it really didn't do much considering they got banged up against Carlton. But yeah, looking at the stat line there, he had 5 clangers, went pretty poorly in disposal-wise. It's, pretty frustrating day for him. Didn't score too well in fantasy as well. So not one that, if he cleaned up his disposal efficiency, he would have scored better. But it's one of those things where he just didn't have much impact going forward. He had the most meters gained out of all of Hawks players. That's pretty impressive by his standards. But he seems to always get those kind of 26 disposals and just doesn't get the score he deserves. And it's pretty frustrating as an owner because the stat line's there, but he's just not making most of the disposal efficiency he gets. He turns it around a fair bit because a lot of his possessions are under pressure with how poor the Hawks midfield does get at times. I think with him at 500K, if you had, like Nathan has, 5 or above, you might want to get rid of him. He's probably a good chance to get rid of him. It's a good price to get rid of before he goes back down. But I think you probably just have to hold and hope that he resets and gets another good score because he's guaranteed to, he's not going to get rested or anything anytime soon. And he's guaranteed a good score eventually. But he's one that I think if you compare him to the likes of Houston or your Doherty's or someone like that, is a bit more expensive and have them as an F6 rather than a D6 rather than a Will Day as a D5, D6. It makes it hard to compete come Supercoach finals because you just, depleted by 100 points essentially across other lines. But yeah, I think it's difficult to get rid of him now. But essentially, if you're playing for overall, I don't think you can really afford to keep him on, just because we all know that when the Hawks get pumped, his scoring suffers, fairly consistently.
Yeah, so I've had my eye on Houston a few times this year, so I think I'm gonna go to Houston, the Houston one, and if I didn't have Ridley, I would probably have Houston last week, so I may have made a bit of a blunder there, considering I think they were basically just about the same price. So you can't win them all, but yeah, I would definitely be going Houston. I think Port Adelaide have a very winnable next couple of games. And then I think their next 3 games after that will make or break their season. I think they've got Collingwood, I think they've got Brisbane, and they've got, I think, Geelong in that 3-week block. So I think they're probably going to, be on a 15-game win streak going into Collingwood. And yeah, I think Houston will be a big part of it. So I would definitely be picking Houston ahead of these two. I mean, ahead of Will Day. Not that Day's done anything wrong, but yeah, I think Houston's the more reliable one. So the next one, so obviously a couple of points of difference here. So Brad Crouch, who he's probably been a winning trade for St Kilda since he came across from Adelaide. And Hugh McCluggage, who just seems to fly under the radar, but a little bit inconsistent with his scoring from time to time. Which one of these two would you be trading in, Thomas, if you had to pick?
It's an interesting one because I think, Crouch is one that if I had him I trades up my sleeve 3-4 weeks earlier, I might have just bit the bullet and decided to go him from a St Kilda bias, but he's been really impressive the last couple of weeks. He's basically taken over Steele's capabilities of tackling. 17 tackles is immense, regardless if you play a waffle side or not. And Nathan will speak more about St Kilda at the back end of the show, but yeah, it was frustrating early on, but he's definitely improved this season. He's become basically a number one mid. His disposal efficiency's improved, quite dramatically across the season, and he's now putting together a pretty excellent season with his tackle pressure. And I think if he can put that into his game more consistent basis, he's guaranteed a very high floor for most of his games. McCluggage, on the other hand, he's playing off that wing and he plays in the midfield rotation as well, so it really depends on where he's playing on the night. But he looked very impressive on his comeback game. I mean, they annihilated Richmond anyway, so it was a bit of downhill skiing for him regardless, and it seems to be the case for McCluggage. He scores whenever they bang up on a team. He does very well. So looking towards West Coast, there's a good chance he could go absolutely bananas against West Coast, considering the likes Dunkley might be rested with a calf complaint. So if McCluggage goes in the midfield rotation, I think he'll dominate. Yeah, you look at his scoreline. I've just got it up here. Other than the last 2 weeks, he didn't hit the ton. He hit 73, 79, and 154 was his last ton. And 157 was his only ton outside that. So consistency-wise, there's a big issue there. But he's a very role-dependent player. But I think out the two, even though Crouch is 40k more expensive, he's definitely more consistent. As much as St Kilda's, we've had our woes with our midfield clearance stoppages and whatnot, I think he's a lot more consistent player out the two. Even though McCluggage has the capabilities of going huge, it's just too far and far in between each game for McCluggage to get that consistent high scoring.
Yeah, I think I'm Brad Crouch as well. Although if I ideally probably wouldn't be bringing in these two, I think there's better points of difference around. I think Lib is still a bit of a point of difference, and I think he's in the top sort of echelon of midfielders. So I think I'd probably pass on both of these, but if you're going to make me pick one, I would pick Crouch, and I think that's purely because I think he's more consistent, and I think McCluggage is definitely the more capable scorer, but then he's capable of being the 50 or 150. So I think Crouch is sort of more the 80 to 100 mark, which for someone at his price probably isn't that bad a pick. Moving on, so Kieran Briggs, who's just been an absolute on a tear. I think he's in rare air according to Champion Data. I think I touched on this last week. About him and his first 5 games, which have just been ridiculous. So he's 497k now. And Marshall is 559. I guess Briggs, probably a lot of people picked up Briggs with the expectation of trading him up to someone like a Marshall. But obviously now that Briggs is scoring like a premium ruckman, I wonder if the conversation has changed around him. So, Thomas, since I believe you own both of these two, which one would you be picking since you've already got both of them? If you had to pick one, who would you be picking?
Yeah, it's interesting because Briggs, this is obviously, we're not saying who necessarily to trade in, but it's more the case who you're keeping as R2. I think if you've got English, it's a no-brainer. English stays there. You've got that conversation at the door, and it's really dependent on where your premiums lie elsewhere. I mean, I know Nathan and myself have both got Darcy. I know Darcy plays. Oh, who'd they play? They play a shit ruck.
Western Bulldogs.
Yeah. No. Next week they played the Dogs this week, but next week they've got Carlton, who don't really have a strong ruck line at the moment with DeConning going out last week. So I think realistically, with the consistency that Darcy has shown and the price he's dropped so far, I think Darcy's out the question in this conversation. It's really between Briggs and Marshall because, Briggs did come up against Gawn and Grundy on a really wet, soggy, it was a Northern Territory game last week against the D's. TIO Traeger Park, I'm pretty sure that's either Northern Territory or Far North Queensland. Northern Territory. So really sloppy conditions, and actually did quite well. He was, I think, before I paid my attention to the St Kilda game, he was on 96 points going into 3-quarter time, and not exactly sure what happened in the final quarter, whether he gassed out or not, but ended up going backwards and ended up on 87. But if you told me that Briggs got 87 in a pretty shit condition against two of the best ruckmen going around, you'd raise your hat and say, well done. Marsh, on the other hand, he's just been, I don't know what it is. Nathan probably might have a bit more insight when we talk about St Kilda later on. But consistency-wise, it just hasn't been there. He went on a tear between round 7 and 11 where he averaged about 120. But other than that, he's been frustrating. He has been hitting his average. I mean, his highest average is 110 back in 2019 when he was playing much more consistently. And then now he's averaging basically 109. It's frustrating for owners because, he's very capable of going huge. I think just the workload on his shoulders is immense because he's just not getting much reprieve with our second rucks being Mitch Owens and whoever else, Caminiti, Cordy in the past. Whether or not, it'll be very, very interesting to see on selection table this Thursday whether they bring in Jack Hayes early to help Marshall out against Grundy and Gawn, or they even give Tom Campbell a shout to mitigate that ruck duo, because I can guarantee you now, if Marshall's left to his own devices against those two, he could be torched apart in that game, just from a basis of those two ruckmen being pretty mobile as it is. So he definitely needs some help there. I think it's a tough one because if you're comparing the two and who to trade out and who to keep as your R2, I think it depends on who you'd bring in, who you're wanting to bring in per se, because Marshall's obviously got the value there, 559. His break even's manageable. It's 114, so his price is not going to deviate too much. Briggs's break even is 67, so you'd assume it goes further up because I know GWS play Hawthorn. Problem is Hawthorn have that double ruck combo, which no one scores well against. So I'd be interested to see whether he even hits that, just because of how much rucks have struggled. You know, the issue with Briggs, I'd say, is that Briggs' sample size is a lot smaller. Marshall's done it, obviously, for the whole season. Briggs came in late, has played about 5 games, has dominated, but probably against the D's showed some signs of fatigue a little bit, as you could see reflected in that scoreline. So I'd probably say unless you're guaranteed or 100% guaranteed a Petrarca, Libba, Butters, whatever, out of a Marshall, I'd probably just still trade Briggs, full knowing he's made you 250k and he's gotten you to a 500k primo. So I'd probably say Briggs, because I know that from a St Kilda point of view, we need Marshall to fire to even have a conversation about finals. So I think Briggs is your man to get rid of. However, I can understand completely why you want to get Marshall out the door, because you might be able to afford a Petrarca or a Libba or whatnot because he's got that high price value. But for now, I'd probably pick Marshall in the side because we all know what he's capable of hitting a 130 out of his ass when he's on form.
Yeah, I'm more in the Marshall camp. Obviously I've got Marshall, but yeah, if you picked up on Briggs at 400, I mean at whatever it was, like 200 odd K, you'd be laughing. But yeah, I think I guess the question is now is it depends on what you view Briggs as. If you view him as a premium, by all means you can feel free to keep him. Especially because I don't think he's going to be getting dropped anytime soon. But if you still view him as as a bit of a rookie gamble and, as paid off, well then, yeah, it's probably time to move him on. I don't think Marshall's too bad an option. But yeah, I would definitely be having a look at Marshall. If you're picking between these two, and that's purely just because I know what Marshall can do, even if he's been a little bit up and down. Whereas I think Briggs you sort of missed the boat on him in a way. But that's just my thoughts. So moving on. So Ben Keys, 506k. I think he's a midfield forward now as well. And Harry Sheasel, I think a lot of us had the start of the year, and he's still going along nicely. So I guess which one are you picking between these two, Thomas, if you had to pick one?
Yeah, I think obviously same as what we've spoken before, and we're not trading in Sheasel. It's more whether you're bringing in Keys or you're trading out Sheasel for Keys per se. But yeah, I'm in a similar situation where I've got Sheasel at F6, and I can actually make this trade where Weddle goes out for Mills, and then Briggs comes out for Keys. Keys is an interesting one because I think I saw on Twitter somewhere that he didn't end up playing much mid-time at all and played a lot forward and just still scored well. So in a sense where you're looking at, well, does Keys' role change? And because of that role change, he's scoring so well? Probably not. He just scored really well against a shit North Melbourne side, and he scored 2 goals as well and looked very dominant. And it did help a lot that the likes of Laird and Dawson barely did anything to get them over the line pretty comfortably. But having said that, I think out of the two, if you're looking at them face-to-face value, probably Keys is the one that's got that upside in him to get a 120, 130, 140 even if he plays out of his skin. He's known to play as a defensive midfielder in the guts or play off that half-forward line. So he's pretty... whilst he might be volatile to a pretty shit score, he can still score pretty healthily as per his previous results. So I'll bring it up quickly. His last few have definitely been very impressive, hence the price rise into the 500k mark. Look, has a 5-round average of 110 plus. He hasn't gone under 100 since round 11. So it's very, very impressive with his scoring. Before that, it was shocking. Don't get me wrong, but I think Sheasel's starting to tire out now. His disposal's not been as clean. North Melbourne getting banged up most weeks anyway. He got 31 disposals, and for a return of 79, it's pretty disappointing. If I just bring up his disposal efficiency, I don't think it was that great either. So, where is it? Harry Sheasel, where are you? Yeah, he went at 7 clangers. Like, whilst he went on average 74 disposal efficiency, 7 clangers didn't help. And as we hark back to the teams that are just getting stuffed around each week, and getting thumped around a little bit on field, a lot of the disposal becomes under pressure because they're not having it on their terms, and that often leads to turnovers. And yeah, as frustrating as it may be, he top scored for North on fantasy, so he shows he's getting the ball. But I think, if you have the luxury to rotate him on and off field dependent on his matchup. So if you look at this week, for example, North are playing Geelong, probably going to get slapped up. Having said that, Geelong have been pretty subpar this season. So if you have that opportunity to essentially loop, it'd be an ideal situation because you can take Sheasel's 100 and what score if it comes to it. But I think ideally at this time of year, if you're able to loop it with someone like Keys, it'd be very good. But I wouldn't blame you if you're in a situation where you've got 7 to 8 trades, you can get rid of Sheasel. I know people already have traded out Sheasel in the past and have gotten rid of him, but I think he's just going to flounder around that kind of 460, 470, anywhere between 440 to 480k mark. But I think Keys is a lot safer option on field just because of how Adelaide are going. And his role, whilst he's playing a bit further upfield, he's definitely involved in a lot of scoring chains and getting on at the end of a few goals. But what are your thoughts on this one, Nathan?
Well, obviously, I had Sheasel like most of us did at the start of the year. And I think I would still prefer to bring back Sheasel in as opposed to getting Ben Keys. I think there's massive question marks on his role. You just got to look back to round 7 when I think they played Collingwood and he basically played as a forward. And I don't think you want to be picking him if he's going to play a lockdown role in the half forward line. So I think the upside with Sheasel is I think his scoring's been a bit impacted by his disposal efficiency, as you touched on. I feel like that's a much easier fix as opposed to being moved around with your role each and every week. So I am firmly in the Sheasel camp on this one. I think if you're going for Keys, it's probably not the worst pick, but I think Sheasel's probably the better option, and especially if you've still got him like you do, Thomas. I definitely wouldn't be moving him on to Ben Keys in that circumstance.
Yeah. If you can ideally, that'd be a good scenario. Yeah. Anyway, moving on to our over underrated segment. We're keeping it pretty brief this week, but obviously a big question that I think a few people have brought in Fyfe for, a cheap score here and there. He has been obviously quite impressive in a few games, but severely disappointing. And as was last week when he got subbed out with a 45. What are your thoughts, Nathan? I don't think you're an owner yourself, but what are your advice for the owners out there? He's priced at 313k. And he doesn't look like he's going to get on the park for the rest of the season. So you're basically carrying him as deadwood. But what are your thoughts on bringing in someone else, whether you're sideways to someone that is on a similar price point, even Angus Sheldrick, who's been burning the house down for Sydney, having a bit of cash that way, or do you go directly up to a premium and just cut your losses and try and get an extra premium on field somehow?
All I'm going to say is I am so glad that I dodged this bullet. I'm so glad that between the two I paid the extra 30 odd K I went to Taron Thomas, because I think now that option is now going to burn you, especially if you are relying on him to be your bench cover, or you had him in combination with someone else in the midfield or the forward line who you're going to rotate around. Oh, God, I don't know where to start with him. He's 315k. Like, that's a really rough price to be, trying to figure out with, finals on the cusp of, with finals in a few weeks, what to do with him. I think the question that I would be asking is what your bench cover looks like, because I would be hoping that you wouldn't be picking Fyfe with the intention of using him at M8 or F6. So I would look to your bench, and if you think you've got someone who is a lock in their side, like like a Wardlaw or a Seamus Mitchell in the forward line, or a Taron Thomas, or I'm not so sure yet on Jasper Fletcher, but the way he's playing, I don't think he's going to get dropped. But mainly if you've got a Wardlaw and a Thomas, who I don't think is going to get dropped anytime soon, I would probably be inclined to move him down to the 102k player. That's a mid forward as well. So then at least you don't lose that mid forward swing. Because I don't think many people would have, a 200 odd K sitting around in the bank. And I would presume most players would have at least their midfields finished. Although to be fair, I don't, but I'm just quickly looking at this now. So, couple of options here. So all the main forwards are over 500k. So even for that, you're going to need 180k. I guess if you've got the 100k, the 180k already, then the logical thing to do is to go upwards. But if you don't, and you've got good bench cover, I think just go down to the 102k player mid forward and just pick them, because they're not going to play anyway. And just hope that Thomas or Wardlaw or someone like that doesn't get injured. Because I don't really think at this stage of the year having a second playing rookie in the forward line, or having three rookies playing in the midfield is really going to matter. If you can get your side full premium with the flexibility of being able to swing players back and forward, who are locks in their side. So, yeah, I guess it depends on your bench cover and your cash flow.
Yeah, 100% agree. I think Nathan's nailed on the head with regards to that. It really depends on who you've got on bench and if you've got cover. Like I know in my position at least, I've got cover on each line pretty comfortably, which is what I plan for in the scenario that I've got with weaker, M6, F6, D6. But as Nathan said, if you have the opportunity, I would just go straight down to a 102 mid forward swing. So at least you got that swing available, and then just upgrade one of your other fat and rookies. So at least you've got a good premium to get on field. But moving on to the next question, which I guess is a pretty popular one considering teams have been struggling to finish off their side strongly due to suspensions, injuries, holding premiums, whatnot. If you're in the position where you're struggling to finish off your side, are you looking at players to finish off your side? Like we're using Taron Thomas and Mills, for example, but we could have used Fyfe who was fit. Guys are sub 400k, or do you think you got to be playing it safe and looking at guys 400 and above to be pretty consistent with the scoring? Or do you think those players like your Thomas, like your Sheldrick, even like your Seamus Mitchell, who's done really well off the half-back flank, do you reckon it's an overrated, underrated statement with regards to finishing off teams cheaply to have the successful bench cover, or needing to have maybe a bit of a worse bench cover like Jasper Fletchers who might not play, or a 120k rookie, to ensure that you've got premiums above that 400k mark that are guaranteed to score your 90s to 100s each week?
Yeah, so this is a very easy answer for me. I'm just going to refer exactly back to what I said last week. I know we're stomping over old grounds, but my answer hasn't changed on this. I think if you're going for F6, I think Taron Thomas is the way to go with that sub 400k option. I don't think he's going to get you the same score as what a, McRae or Cornelio or someone like that will. But he's a warm body. And at this time of the year, you just need warm bodies. As for Callum Mills, at the minute, I probably wouldn't be doing him because he's purely a midfielder, I believe. But if he gains defender eligibility, then absolutely that option does open up. I just think in the midfield you've got to be getting the 8 best players that you can, regardless of price, form, injury. I think you just got to get. I think it's too risky in the midfield to run the roulette of like people with Jack Steele, for example, who people brought in at 500k expecting him to go back up, and he just hasn't gone back up. So I think that's the risk you're going to run with Mills. But as I said, if he gains defender eligibility and he's your D6, I can absolutely say go for it, but not in the midfield. I think Thomas is a great F6, but not in the midfield. So Thomas, yes, in the forward line, but both of them, no, in the midfield.
Yeah, I only understand you're kind of thinking I'd probably be a slight disagreement with regards to Mills as a specific example, because I think he was one that was heavily impacted by injury, but he's shown he's fully capable of scoring like a Petrarca or something like that. Might not hit your 150s and 160s as often, but I could see him easily scoring a 120 plus against Richmond on a Thursday night at 400k. You know, you'd be kicking yourself if you missed out, even if you wanted to wait if you did get a DPP playing down back. But I think you're right in saying that there is a lot less risk finishing off a side in your mids and in your forwards and defenders, with your Taron Thomases, with your Himmelbergs like that, because at least you know that there's less risk, as we easily saw on the weekend. You just have to look no further than a Himmelberg or say a Thomas and a Canelio. You know, Thomas outscored Canelio, and then in the defence, Himmelberg outscored Ridley. So, whereas the mids, you just have to look at, say, a Steele or any other midfielder, Merritt. Merritt went berserk at 160 whatever points he scored, versus a Mills who cracked the ton, and then Steele who didn't crack the ton. So I think there's a lot more risk there. But having said that, I think if you can find those players like a Mills, I think this is probably the week to jump on him. But he's one that, you know, is very capable. It's very player dependent who you're bringing in. Obviously, if you're looking at the next best 400k option, just because you're forced to and you already have a Mills per se and you're trying to finish off your midfield or whatever, I'd probably look elsewhere. But as Nathan said pretty clearly, that if you can finish off your team cheaply through the forwards and defences and making sure you've got your best 8 mids as possible, I think that's the best way to go. But moving on to our VC and C options. This is obviously a pretty interesting one this week with a few juicy matchups. But what are your thoughts on VCs and Cs? I know obviously Merritt plays Adelaide. Stewart goes at home against North, which you could go absolutely bonkers with. But what are your thoughts on VC and C? Are any smokies out there?
Yeah, well, for me, I think the vice captain is definitely going to come from the Friday night game. Both of these sides don't tag; they'll back their system in, which means I think Nick Dacos and Bontempelli will both get off the chain. I think I'd be leaning towards Nick Dacos in that battle. So at the minute, I've got the vice captaincy on him. Maybe a bit of a wrap Collingwood around the comfy scarf around the neck as well. And the captaincy. At this stage, I have got it on Sean Darcy, and that's because Carlton don't have a ruckman. And if they're going to ruck against Silvani, if they're going to ruck Silvani and Lewis Young in the ruck again, Darcy should have an absolute field day, which might also help Sarong and that other guy who I'm going to talk about in a minute, in the midfield. But yeah, I think the Friday night game's just full of players, Bulldogs and Collingwood, two really strong Supercoach sides. I mean, you could even, if you were game enough, you could even chuck it on the Goey if you kept him, because I think he would go gangbusters as well. So, yeah, I think that's where I'm leaning. How about yourself?
Yeah, I think Friday night's the way to go. You could even go Errol Gordon if you wanted to risk it against Richmond, but I think they want to bounce back pretty strongly after getting a drubbing at the Gabba against Brisbane. Yeah, I think you're right in saying, I mean, could you risk it on Neil as well and miss out on the Dogs and Collingwood? Probably. Neil could go gangbusters, but they could also go wanting to play nice and safe and just get the job done and don't risk any injuries. look, I'd probably say your Dogs and Collingwood's your best bet because you don't want to miss out on either one of Bontempelli or Dacos getting a 140 plus. I don't think you'll lose out on either of them. If you do pick one, I don't think one's going to go hugely against the other, as we saw on the weekend. Both scored pretty comfortably. But yeah, the captaincy option, any 1-3 of merit from that 320 game. Darcy, if they do bring him back up, they'll probably have a plan in place to try and combat him, but he could easily go 150 if he plays, especially at home. And then the Cats, Stewart has that defensive line to himself at GMHBA Stadium, so he could go nuts just marking everything down back. But I think any of those three are a safe fallback option, but I don't think you want to risk out and miss out on a huge score Friday night because I'm pretty sure that game's a sellout. And
yes, it is. There's no standing room left. There's going to be a big game. So
yeah, huge game night. And I could see one of those two absolutely going huge to try and bring their side over the line, especially the Dogs who are in finals contention now. Anyway, I'll leave it to Nathan to finish it off.
Well, this is a moment everyone's been waiting for. No doubt about it. It's going to give a slight little knock to St Kilda. They've now put themselves at a disadvantage by not gaining any percentage against West Coast. And my dad actually said in the middle of the week that he was going to tip West Coast. And when they were 31 points up, I thought you were going to be kidding me that they were actually going to pull this off. And normality got restored a little bit, but that is a wasted opportunity for St Kilda, given that the three sides below them on the ladder all have to play West Coast again. So Essendon and Adelaide and the Bulldogs all have to play West Coast. So I just hope that doesn't come back to haunt St Kilda, that result. But my real names this week, going to start off with Andrew Brayshaw. Not sure if he's been in here before. He might have been, given how his scoring's been going this year. But Sean Darcy, as far as I'm aware, dominated that ruck contest against Tim English. And yet, I don't know where, Andrew, where you went. You didn't seem to be anywhere near the ball. You only got 80 odd, which your price is probably not where you need to be. And to be honest, I've only traded you in about 4 weeks ago, but I'm already running really thin with you. And we can't be having this at this time of the year, Andrew. This is not the time of the year. It's not round 4 anymore. This is the serious stuff of the year. You know, your side's probably not going to make the 8, but, you know, you're in a fight for it. So you need to be performing better than that. Otherwise, your side's not going to make the 8, which will be a failure, no matter how you look at it. And you will be out of a lot of Supercoach sides, which, of course, is the more important thing as opposed to AFL. A lot of owners are probably fed up with you. So, Andrew, you need to lift in that midfield because there are plenty of other options who can come in and replace you. And my other nag for this week is the Melbourne Football Club. Now, almost fell off my chair when I heard this today. So I don't know if anyone out there listens to 1116 SCM, but David King, who I regard very highly, he's basically the middleman between, the front run of media and Champion Data, which for those of you that don't know, are the statisticians of the AFL, and they basically record all of these ridiculously complicated stats that that statisticians and people like David King can use and determine a core 4 profile, which is basically 12 key areas that measures how a side goes. And Melbourne over the last 6 weeks are the number 1 side statistically, and yet they've only won 2 games, and they are horrific in the forward line. They're 17th for scoring, and they've got Petrarca, they've got Gawn, they've got Grundy, they've got Bailey Fritsch, they've had Van Rooyen down there, they've had Jack Viney, they've had They've had Bailey Fridge. They've got Josiah Pickett. So it's not like they're short of talent, and yet to be 17th in the league for scoring over the last 6 weeks is just not on from a top 4 side. And to be honest, I think that they now would be praying that Collingwood will finish first and them holding on to 4th spot and getting essentially a home final, if you will, against Collingwood, even if there'll be 75,000 Collingwood supporters there, because I can't see them travelling to Port Adelaide or Brisbane and beating them. And there's no guarantee that they're actually going to be in the top 4 at the end of this week. So I had a look, they're playing St Kilda this week, who, I've already touched on them. But if they lose to St Kilda, they're going to fall out of the top 4. And if you had have said that 4 weeks ago, that would have been unfathomable that Melbourne would be statistically the best side over the last 6 weeks, and yet at a chance of falling out of the top 4. So, to the Melbourne Football Club, I'm just going to refer to what David King said. You need to experiment with some players in the forward line, because clearly the mix down there that you've got at the minute isn't working. There's no way on earth that you're going to be able to hold Collingwood or Port Adelaide or Brisbane to 50 points in the final. I just don't think that's going to happen. So, you've got to find another 3 or 4 goals a game at least to get up with those 3 sides. And there's no obvious solution other than Christian Petrarca on paper. But, they're 18th for accuracy in front of goal. I think they've kicked the last 6 weeks. I think they're like 40 goals and 75 behinds or something insane. So if that doesn't correct, this is going to be a wasted season. And you would say on paper that Melbourne have probably, definitely a top 4 list on talent, and they're just not maximising it. So I know they might be number 1 in their defensive stats, and they're number 1 in general contested possessions, but that's not going to count for anything if you can't put it on the scoreboard. So, to Simon Goodwin, to the Melbourne Football Club, there needs to be a solution to these forward line woes, because come finals, your game is going to get put on the test. And if you're only averaging 61 points going into finals, it's very hard just to flick a switch and just find another 5 or 6 goals in a game. So that is my rant for this week. I actually hope St Kilda do win this week and knock Melbourne out of the top 4. I don't think they will. But that will be a big story. Might be the biggest story of the weekend, I think, if Melbourne lose and fall out of the top 4.
Yeah, I think it creates a pretty big narrative moving into this weekend, especially considering the Saints almost bottled the impossible bottle job against West Coast, even though I think every St Kilda supporter saw it coming with West Coast, getting belted to pillar to post by almost 200 points in Sydney and firing back right up. So I think it'll be definitely an interesting game, because I know from a St Kilda's point of view, if we do manage to win that game, it sets up a really good 4-week block for them to really pounce into finals, because they've got Gold Coast, Northern and Hawthorn, which are all very winnable games, and it can really set their season back up into a really good position. But I think the pressure goes on the players a lot, but they have to come out firing against the Demons. And as you said, if the D's are averaging 61 points as it is, St Kilda have a habit of negating their opposition scoring quite effectively. Might not have been so in the last couple of weeks, but on a season average have done so pretty well. So if they can refine that form against the D's, I think we come up against a pretty tight encounter. But that's all we got time for today. Hopefully all teams are set well for the last remaining couple rounds before Supercoach finals, and you're in a position where you can pounce to get bragging rights for Supercoach finals and put yourself in a really good position. But other than that, good luck for the rest of the week, and I hope your team goes well. If not, there's obviously the Ashes and Wimbledon to keep yourself busy if you feel like footy's gone to shit. But In the meantime, we'll catch you next round.